In the 1980s, a group of friends, for in all, set off to explore one of the largest cave systems in the American Midwest. They were amateur spelunkers, but they'd been in and out of small caves for years and felt confident. The cave was named Sycamore Cave, infamous locally for its narrow passages and labyrinthine tunnels, stretching miles underground. It was also rumored to be cursed, haunted by those who had lost their lives inside. Of course, they didn't believe in such things. They were just there for an adventure. They arrived just before dusk, but time slipped away from them as they explored the first series of caverns. Hours passed as they squeezed through passages, crawled along tunnels, and marveled at vast chambers. By midnight, they were deep inside the earth, and that was when they felt it. The air turned colder, almost suffocating. They should have been out by then, but they had taken a wrong turn somewhere along the way. They couldn't go back the way they came. The passage had narrowed as if the walls had somehow shifted. Forced deeper into the cave, they pressed forward in silence, except for the nervous laughter of one friend, David. He was the joker of the group, always making light of things, but now his laugh echoed strangely, bouncing off the cold walls with an odd, mocking tone. Hours turned into a blur. Just when they thought they would find an exit, they stumbled upon something that froze them in their tracks. A pile of dusty, crumbling bones. At first, they thought it might be an animal, but the bones were human, unmistakably human, half buried in the damp earth. The friends stared, then noticed a strange detail, a small, frayed rope around one of the bones, leading into the darkness. It looked like it had been tied to someone's ankle, as if to drag them back. Nervously, they moved away, but the rope seemed to follow them, tangled in their flashlights, snagging on rocks as they walked. And then they heard it, a faint scratching noise, far off but unmistakable, like fingers clawing at stone. David laughed nervously, saying it was just the wind, but the sound grew louder, closer, accompanied by a faint, ragged whisper. "Stay." They quickened their pace, hearts pounding, trying to keep their voices down. But the scratching followed, louder and louder, until it was no longer a sound. It was a vibration, something deep within the walls themselves. The tunnel narrowed again, and they had to squeeze through a gap barely wide enough for a single person. One of them, Anna, went first, followed by Sam, then David. But when it was Mike's turn, he froze. In the darkness behind him, he could swear he saw a figure, a tall, shadowy form, hunched and waiting. The flashlight flickered, and he caught a glimpse of pale, sunken eyes staring back at him. He screamed, lunging through the gap, tearing his shirt on a jagged rock as he scrambled to catch up. But when he turned back, the shadow was gone. Only the faint sound of scratching remained, now further back, growing fainter. They pressed on, and finally, they reached a small chamber, where they collapsed, breathing heavily, desperately trying to keep their cool. David began to laugh again, but this time it wasn't his usual laugh. It was higher, strangled, as though he was trying to cover something up. The others stared at him in silence as he continued, his laughter growing more distorted, an edge of hysteria in his voice. Then he stopped, and in the silence that followed, they heard it clearly, a voice, unmistakably David's, echoing back from the darkness they had left behind. "Stay with me," it whispered. David's face went white. It wasn't him saying it. He was sitting right there, staring in horror, his lips tightly shut. The others realized in that sickening moment that something else was mimicking his voice, using his laugh to lure them back into the darkness. Panicked, they bolted. The tunnel seemed to close in on them as they fled, every rock and wall pressing in as if trying to trap them. The voice, echoing, calling out from every direction, "Stay with me." Finally, as dawn broke, they found their way out. When they emerged, gasping for fresh air, the locals were waiting. They had been on edge, having seen the flashlights disappear the night before. The group told them everything, but the locals only nodded grimly. Sycamore Cave's taken people before. One of the townsfolk said, his voice low. It doesn't like letting them go. Years later, only one of the four still spoke of the event. The others refused to say a word about that night. But David, haunted and broken, would sometimes laugh that same high-pitched, twisted laugh he had in the cave and say, "I didn't want to leave, but something made me." Some say that Sycamore Cave still calls out to this day, the whispers of those who ventured too deep, voices of the lost echoing off the walls, hoping to draw others in to stay with them forever.